So imagine being so incredibly wealthy that when you realize your memory is starting to fade, you don't just start writing things down in a notebook.
Right. Or, just set a quick reminder on your phone if we're talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. You don't do any of that. Instead, you actually go out and buy a team of human beings.
Which is just, it's wild to even think about.
It really is. You assign one person to memorize the works of Homer, you get another to memorize Hesiod, and 9 others to memorize all the Greek lyric poets.
Yeah.
You essentially purchase this whole squad of walking, breathing, external hard drives, basically just to stand next to you at dinner parties.
What's fascinating here is that, well, obviously it's an astonishing historical flex, right?
Oh, totally.
But it also perfectly captures this psychological trap that we are, actually still falling into today. We constantly mistake just having access to information for actually possessing knowledge.
And that is exactly why we're pulling you into this deep dive today. Because, well, you're someone who consumes a massive amount of information. You want to be well-informed, but you are very likely feeling that modern sense of just drowning in the noise.
Yeah, that overload.
Exactly. So to find a way out, we are unpacking this really remarkable collection of texts written over 2,000 years ago. They're called Letters from a Stoic, and they're written by Lucius Annaeus Seneca.
And our mission here really isn't to just recite ancient history.
No, not at all.
We want to extract Seneca's timeless blueprints for finding mental clarity, managing all that information overload, and actually living a truly good life.
But, it is definitely worth setting the stage with who Seneca actually was.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he completely defies the stereotype of an ancient philosopher. Like if you were picturing this serene monk just sitting on a mountaintop, completely detached from worldly temptations.
Yeah, you definitely have the wrong guy.
You really do.
Seneca was deeply entangled in the absolute messiest parts of human society.
To say the least. He was born around 4 BC, and he suffered his entire life from this severe chronic asthma, which is actually a really key detail we're going to come back to later.
Right.
And he was exiled to the island of Corsica for 8 years on charges of adultery with an imperial princess.
Which is quite the scandal.
It is. And then, in this massive twist of fate, he gets recalled to Rome. Why? To become the tutor and eventually the unofficial chief minister to a teenage boy who would grow up to be the infamous Emperor Nero.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the sheer scale of Seneca's contradictions.
Oh, they are massive.
Right, because he was a man who wrote so passionately about the contempt of wealth. He argued that a true Stoic should just be indifferent to money.
Totally indifferent.
Yet he was viciously attacked by his contemporaries for acquiring an estimated 300 million sesterces.
Unbelievable.
And his critics loved pointing out that he supposedly hosted these banquets, served on 500 identical citrus wood tables with ivory legs.
500 identical tables. You can't even justify that. That is just next-level extravagance.
You really can't. But, that hypocrisy, or at least that really intense struggle with his own material success, is exactly where his value lies to us today.
How so?
Well, he humanized Stoicism. Early Stoicism could be incredibly rigid. It focused a lot on this theoretical ideal of the perfect, totally emotionless sage.
Right, the guy who never gets upset.
Exactly. But Seneca wasn't a perfect sage. He was a deeply flawed guy battling his own frailties, and he was trying to survive the vicious, literal cutthroat politics of Nero's court.
Yeah, literally cutthroat.
So he was writing these letters to his correspondent, Lucilius, but he was really writing them to remind himself how to live.
Just to keep his own head on straight.
Exactly. And that vulnerability is really what makes his advice so immediately applicable to you right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that modern feeling of drowning in noise. Because Seneca addresses this right out of the gate in letter 2.
It really does.
He attacks the way we consume information. He specifically warns against what he calls the flying visit.
Ah, yes, the flying visit.
He argues that constantly skipping from one book to another or from one author to another is essentially like food that is vomited up before it can even be digested. He literally writes, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere."
And he uses this fantastic botanical metaphor alongside that.
Oh, right, with the plant.
Yeah, he says a plant which is frequently moved never grows strong.
Makes sense.
Because when we flit from topic to topic, we never actually allow the roots of knowledge to take hold. We confuse the sheer volume of consumption with, actual learning.
Well, isn't this exactly like having 50 browser tabs open today?
Oh, completely.
We skim a headline, we jump to a 15-second video, we scroll a feed for a minute. We are literally taking flying visits all day long.
The browser tab analogy is just perfect because it maps directly onto how cognitive load actually works in the brain. Yeah, just like a computer's RAM gets entirely eaten up by dozens of background tabs that are constantly refreshing, Seneca is pointing out that these flying visits eat up our mental RAM.
That makes so much sense.
Right. When you are rapidly switching contexts, you leave yourself with zero processing power for actual digestion. So the information never transfers from short-term memory into long-term wisdom.
Which brings us right back to that wealthy guy with a terrible memory I mentioned at the start, Calvisius Sabinus.
Oh, yes. Letter 27.
Right. Seneca tells this hilarious story where Sabinus would just forget the names of Ulysses or Achilles right in the middle of a sentence.
Just completely draw a blank.
Exactly. So he bought those slaves for 100,000 sesterces each to memorize the classics for him. And he actually believed that because his slaves knew the poetry, he somehow knew the poetry.
It's so delusional.
It is. Whenever he gave a dinner party, he'd still break down halfway through a word, and he'd literally have them feed him the rest of the sentence.
It's absurd, but the underlying psychology is actually profoundly relevant for us.
Definitely.
Because Seneca uses this story to explore what actually constitutes a sound mind. He points out in letter 33 that a sound mind cannot be bought, and crucially, it cannot be borrowed.
You have to earn it.
Exactly. He warns Lucilius, don't just be a parrot who remembers what others said.
Okay, but wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
In today's world, we essentially all have slaves doing our memorization for us. It's called a search engine.
Right, the external brain.
Yeah, we outsource our memory to our phones all the time.
Yeah.
So why is that necessarily a bad thing? Like, if I can look up a quote or a historical fact in 2 seconds, why do I actually need to digest it?
Because there is a massive difference between just retrieving a fact and possessing a philosophy.
Okay, that's fair.
Seneca says it is one thing to remember what the founders of Stoicism like Zeno or Cleanthes said, but it's an entirely different thing to actually know it.
Like, deeply know it.
Right. To truly know something is to make it your own. You must produce from your own resources, because if you're just accessing a search engine, you haven't changed your character at all.
You're just pulling up data.
Exactly. You are just retrieving data. To withstand the chaos of life, that wisdom has to be integrated into your nervous system, and that only happens through deep, focused contemplation.
All right, closing 49 browser tabs and deeply digesting one good thought a day makes perfect sense in theory.
Right, in theory.
But let me challenge this with the reality of just daily life. Digesting knowledge is great, but let's say my office is an open floor plan.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah. Phones are ringing, people are talking loudly, there's constant interruptions. So if we've successfully focused our minds, how do we protect that focus when the world around us is just so incredibly loud?
This is exactly where Seneca moves from theory to some really extreme practical application.
He really does go extreme.
Yeah. In letter 56, he gives us this sort of masterclass on dealing with an incredibly hostile environment. And he doesn't do it from some quiet, peaceful country estate.
No, of course not.
He deliberately takes lodgings directly above a public bathhouse right in the middle of Rome.
And the way he describes the noise in this letter is just pure comedy.
It's so vivid.
It is. He lists all the specific sounds filtering up through his floorboards just to prove how chaotic it is. He talks about the grunting of the weightlifters working out, the hissing of their breath.
Yeah.
He says he can hear the smack of the massage therapist's hands, and he even notes that he can tell if the hand is hitting the skin flat or cupped.
The attention to detail is just brilliant.
Right. He mentions a guy who likes the sound of his own voice in the bath, people doing massive cannonballs into the pool, and some ball players shouting out the score.
It is a complete sensory nightmare.
But wait, he saves the worst for last.
Oh, right.
The most piercing sound of all? The shrill, unbroken cry of the professional armpit hair plucker.
Which is quite a job title.
Yeah, and this guy apparently only stops yelling when he's making a client yell instead. Plus, you have the sausage seller and the pastry vendor hawking their food over all of this. It's just absolute bedlam.
It is.
And my immediate reaction when reading this is, well, why on earth would a wealthy philosopher subject himself to this? It sounds like totally unnecessary self-torture.
It really does sound like torture, but he explicitly frames it as a test.
A test of what?
Well, he wanted to prove a fundamental Stoic concept. He argues that absolute bedlam outside doesn't matter as long as there is no commotion within. He is basically dissecting the difference between biological stress and psychological suffering.
So what does this all mean in practice? How does he justify it?
Seneca argues that if you need a perfectly silent house to sleep like, where every door is padded and the slaves have to walk around on tiptoe, your mind is actually in a ferment.
So you're not actually calm.
Yeah, exactly. You aren't genuinely at peace. You are just artificially controlling your environment. He says the temperament that startles and gets angry at every little chance noise hasn't attained any inward detachment at all.
Wow. Because your focus is just totally fragile.
Right. It depends entirely on external cooperation. True stillness isn't the absence of external noise. It's the absence of internal conflict.
Okay, I understand building this internal citadel that can just ignore the armpit hair plucker. But surely there has to be a limit.
What do you mean?
Like if I am genuinely overwhelmed by my job, my city is way too loud, and my stress levels are just through the roof, the most logical fix is to remove myself from the stressor, right?
The instinct to escape.
Yeah. If I'm stressed, shouldn't I just take a vacation to clear my head, go to a beach in Hawaii, reset, and just unplug?
Well, that is the exact instinct Seneca totally dismantles in Letter 28.
Oh boy.
He calls it the travel fallacy. He actually quotes Socrates, asking, "How can you wonder your travels do you no good when you carry yourself around with you?" Right. Seneca tells Lucilius, "You are running away in your own company."
I have to admit, you are running away in your own company is a really tough pill to swallow.
It really is.
But I still don't entirely buy it. I mean, if I am physically sitting on a quiet beach instead of in a chaotic, stressful cubicle, my blood pressure is definitely going to drop. I will be less stressed.
Temporarily, sure, perhaps. But Seneca is identifying a fatal flaw in our human programming here. We constantly mistake internal distress for external discomfort.
Okay, go on.
We think the city is making us anxious, but the anxiety is actually the lens through which we are viewing the city. And you cannot outrun a lens.
That's a great way to put it.
He compares the mind to cargo in a ship. If the cargo is all loose and rolling around, the movement of the ship just makes it more dangerous. Taking your burdened spirit to a beach in another country doesn't suddenly make the burden any lighter.
Changing your latitude doesn't change your attitude.
Exactly. Until you lay aside the load on your spirit, nowhere is going to satisfy you. You will inevitably get bored of the new scenery, you'll find something there to be annoyed by, and you'll just want to move again.
All right, so if escaping doesn't work, and we obviously can't just artificially silence the whole world around us, how do we actually lay aside that load on our spirit?
That's the big question.
Because the deepest disruptions to our peace, they aren't loud noises or annoying coworkers. They are massive existential fears.
The really heavy stuff.
Yeah, the terror of poverty, losing our life savings, losing our status, or, death, facing a terminal diagnosis. How does Seneca prepare for the worst?
And here's where Stoicism transitions from just a philosophy of endurance to a philosophy of active offense. They utilize one of their most powerful psychological tools, which is the rehearsal of adversity.
Rehearsing it.
Yes, you don't just sit around waiting in fear for bad things to happen. You proactively practice them.
Which brings us directly to the Saturnalia challenge in letter 18.
Ah, yeah.
So Saturnalia was this wild, month-long holiday in December in ancient Rome. It was basically characterized by huge parties, heavy drinking, everyone wearing festive, expensive clothes.
Basically a month-long carnival.
Exactly. Now, Seneca didn't say, lock yourself in a closet and boycott the holiday completely.
No, he said blend in.
Right. He advised blending in outwardly. Like, don't be that annoying person making a giant show of how strict and ascetic you are. But inwardly, he said this is the exact time to put yourself to the test.
He tells Lucilius to set aside a few days to practice actual poverty. And we're not talking about a comfortable sort of glamping version of poverty.
He means the real gritty thing.
Right.
He specifically tells him to spend 3 or 4 days eating hard, grimy bread and wearing coarse, rough clothing. And while he is sitting there eating stale bread on a hard palate, he needs to ask himself out loud, is this what I used to dread?
The mechanism at play here is essentially ancient exposure therapy. It taps into what modern psychology calls hedonic adaptation.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, we spend our lives terrified of losing our wealth, right? That abstract fear dictates our career choices, it causes us endless insomnia, and it makes us complete slaves to our status.
Absolutely.
Anxiety lives almost entirely in the imagination. The brain's threat detection system is just catastrophizing the unknown. So by actually experiencing the absolute worst-case scenario voluntarily, you give your nervous system physical proof that your body can survive it.
So what does this all mean? It's essentially a fire drill for your bank account.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
You deliberately induce the discomfort so that you demystify it. You realize that what you feared isn't actually that bad. Your baseline of happiness isn't permanently destroyed just by eating cheap food.
Exactly.
But Seneca didn't just stop at rehearsing financial ruin, did he? Because of that lifelong struggle with severe asthma we mentioned earlier, he was forced to rehearse something much, much more profound.
He really was. In letter 54, he gives this harrowing description of his severe asthma attacks. He said the difficulty in breathing was like a squall that would last about an hour, and it left him constantly at his last gasp, just feeling as though he were suffocating.
That's terrifying.
It gets heavier. His doctors explicitly referred to these specific attacks as rehearsing death.
Experiencing that on a regular basis just sounds completely paralyzing.
It would be if he let his imagination run wild. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, look at how he logically deconstructs the panic.
Right?
As he's struggling for breath, actively fighting through this physical squall, he mentally frames it to conquer the ultimate human fear. He tells himself death is just not being.
Not being.
Yeah, he says, what that is like, I know already. It will be exactly the same after me as it was before me.
Wow. And he used this brilliant analogy of a lamp. He asks, would you say a lamp is worse off when it is put out than it was before it was lit?
It's such a striking image.
It is. We are the lamp. We are lit for a brief period, and then we are put out. There might be some physical suffering in the brief process of the flame being extinguished, but at either end of it, the eternity before we were born and the eternity after we die, there is only deep, undisturbed tranquility.
It's a massive perspective shift. Human beings are, well, we are entirely obsessed with the terrifying moment the flame goes out.
Of course we are.
But we completely ignore the billions of years before the flame was struck, which, didn't bother us at all.
One bit.
Seneca believed that to truly live a vibrant life, you have to unlearn how to be a slave to fear. And the only physiological way to do that is to familiarize yourself with death. As he profoundly states, a person who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a minute.
Go for it.
Because listening to this progression, tuning out the world to build an internal citadel, realizing vacations are pointless, practicing poverty, making peace with the void of death, it can start to sound intensely cold.
I can see that.
If I am doing all this intense self-fortification, aren't I just turning myself into an isolated emotional island? Did Seneca actually care about other people, or was he just obsessed with his own mental armor?
That is the most common critique of Stoicism, and it actually stems from a misunderstanding of the word apatheia.
Apathy, right?
Right. We translate it today as apathy, which implies a total lack of caring. But for the Stoics, it meant freedom from irrational passions, not freedom from human connection.
Oh, interesting distinction.
In letter 9, Seneca clarifies this beautifully. He firmly states that the Stoic wise man is self-sufficient. He doesn't need anything outside himself to be fundamentally okay. But self-sufficient as he is, he still deeply desires friends.
But the motivation for that friendship is completely inverted from how we usually operate, isn't it?
Exactly. Seneca relentlessly criticizes people who make friends solely for utility. The fair weather friends who only want to network when you are successful.
Right.
He says you don't make a friend so you have someone to sit by your sickbed or someone to rescue you if you lose your money.
Then if you are entirely self-sufficient, why do you make a friend at all?
To have someone you can sit by when they are sick. To have someone you can die for.
Wow.
You seek friendship for its own sake, as an arena to practice noble virtues. He quotes another philosopher who said, "If you wish to be loved, love."
That's beautiful.
It is not a transactional business deal where you weigh what you get out of it. It is a vital opportunity to just pour your own goodness and empathy into another human being.
And what's truly fascinating is that his empathy wasn't just reserved for his wealthy aristocratic peers.
Right at all.
This is where Seneca's writings feel breathtakingly progressive for the first century. In letter 47, he explicitly tackles the Roman treatment of slaves.
Yes.
You have to remember the entire Roman economy and social structure were built on brutal, institutionalized slavery.
It was the foundation of their world.
Exactly. And the conventions of his day were incredibly harsh.
To suggest otherwise was basically to attack the very fabric of Roman high society.
Yet Seneca openly describes these lavish banquets where the master of the house eats until he literally vomits. And all the while, the slaves are forced to stand around him in absolute silence.
Yeah.
If they even accidentally cough or sneeze, they're beaten with a stick. They're forced to stand awake all night, mopping up spittle, wiping away the drunken vomit of the guests.
It's horrifying.
It is. And Seneca points out the devastating psychological toll this takes. Because they are forced to be silent to his face, they inevitably talk about him behind his back.
Right.
He quotes a common proverb of the time, "You've as many enemies as you slaves." But Seneca fiercely pushes back, saying, "We don't acquire them as enemies, we make them enemies by treating them like animals."
And his analysis here is deeply rooted in the concept of the Stoic cosmopolis.
The cosmopolis.
Yeah, it's the idea of a universal human brotherhood that completely transcends arbitrary class lines. He reminds Lucilius that the person he calls a slave traces his origin to the exact same stock, breathes the same sky, lives the same way, and dies the exact same way.
They're completely equal.
Exactly. He even points out the hypocrisy by noting how quickly the wheel of fortune can turn. Many highborn Romans found themselves captured in war and sold into slavery practically overnight.
Which leads him to deliver this really profound rule. He says, remember to treat your inferiors exactly as you would want to be treated by your own superiors.
It's a call for radical empathy. He is telling Lucilius that social position is just clothing. Underneath it, the emperor and the slave are fundamentally equal because, well, we are all fellow slaves to the unpredictable whims of fortune.
Man, what a journey this has been.
It really covers a lot of ground.
It does. We started with the chaos of information overload and learned that to truly know something, we have to stop taking flying visits and actually do the hard work of digesting knowledge until it becomes our character.
Right.
We learned that true focus means you could live above the bedlam of a bathhouse without your mind being in ferment.
Which is still hard to imagine, but yes.
True. We saw how the travel fallacy exposes that anxiety is a lens, not a location. We explored how deliberately practicing our worst fears, like poverty, gives our nervous system the proof it needs to just stop catastrophizing.
Absolutely.
And finally, we dismantled the myth of the cold Stoic, revealing a philosophy grounded in radical empathy and universal brotherhood.
Which perfectly brings us to the ultimate purpose of studying these 2,000-year-old letters.
Yes, why we're doing this at all.
Exactly. In letter 48, Seneca explicitly warns Lucilius not to get bogged down in the academic minutiae or the theoretical debates of philosophy. He openly mocks the logic puzzles that the academics of his day just obsessed over.
Oh, I love this part. He brings up this completely ridiculous syllogism they used to argue about. He says, mouse is a syllable and a mouse nibbles cheese. Therefore, a syllable nibbles cheese.
Right, which is just nonsense.
Complete nonsense.
And Seneca's basically throwing his hands up saying, is this what we philosophers grow our beards long for?
Right.
Is this what we waste our time on? People are facing the terror of death, the crush of poverty, the misery of losing their loved ones. Humanity is stretching out its hands for help.
They need real answers.
Exactly. Philosophy is not a parlor trick. It's not some clever word game to make you look smart at a dinner party. It is a life raft. It is a practical tool meant to cure the soul, reduce anxiety, and help us navigate a deeply chaotic world.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative image to just sort of anchor all of this.
Yes, it does. In letter 41, Seneca paints this really breathtaking scene. He tells you to imagine walking into a dense, ancient forest.
Okay, picture that.
The trees are so towering and so incredibly old that their branches completely block out the sky. Or imagine walking into a massive, naturally hollowed-out cave that extends deep, deep into a mountain.
Wow.
When you stand in environments like that, you feel an instinctual, overwhelming sense of awe. You feel the presence of something divine.
Right, that goosebump feeling.
Exactly. Now, Seneca argues that when you see a person who is genuinely brave, a person who remains entirely calm in the middle of a storm, a person who is grounded and happy even in the worst adversity, you feel that exact same sense of awe.
That's incredible.
You look at that human being the exact same way you look at that ancient forest.
Because you realize that the unshakable peace they possess isn't coming from their environment. It's coming from inside them.
Precisely. That awe-inspiring force is a piece of the divine residing within a human mind.
It's all internal.
It is. So as you step back out into your loud, chaotic day, as your phone starts buzzing and the world demands your attention with 50 new browser tabs, I want you to mull over this final question.
Go ahead.
Are you spending all your time and energy endlessly decorating the outside of your house? Or are you finally ready to cultivate that awe-inspiring ancient forest within your own mind?